An industry leader says the government has failed to come up with solutions in the face of soaring gas costs for businesses. The price cap that covers consumers doesn't apply to them, and the head of UK Steel says he's baffled the government isn't helping.
I think if we're headed to a very dark place if the government doesn't step in now, like other countries in the rest of Europe have already stepped in.
With the government so far resisting the pressure to intervene, we'll be looking at the economic challenges facing businesses and consumers. Also tonight, staff shortages at abattoirs are leading to a human disaster, say farmers, as healthy pigs are having to be destroyed. At least 50 people are killed in a suicide bomb attack in a mosque in the Afghan city of Kunduz.
The Nobel Peace Prize for 2021 to Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov.
Two journalists from the Philippines and Russia are awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their fight in defence of free speech.
Your Royal Highness.
Mummy!
Family are all gathered in the drawing room.
And we speak to the star of Spencer, the new movie about Princess Diana's relationship with the royal family.
And coming up in the sport on the BBC News channel, problems in Prague for Wales. They've been taking on the Czech Republic in a crucial World Cup qualifier.
Good evening. Leaders from some of the UK's most energy-intensive industries say the government has failed to offer any immediate solutions to their concerns about the soaring cost of gas after talks this afternoon with the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng. Unlike domestic customers, businesses are not protected by a price cap, leaving them exposed to what the regulator Ofgem has called the unprecedented price rises of recent weeks. In a statement, Mr Kwarteng promised to continue working closely with companies to help mitigate the impact of any cost increases. Here's our business editor, Simon Jack.
It's not just consumers feeling the heat of the gas crisis. Businesses like Pilkington Glass rely on huge quantities of energy to keep the fires burning. But soaring gas prices recently have shocked veterans of heavy industry.
I've been working for Pilkington for 30 odd years, never known anything like it at all. And the impact is literally millions of pounds a month.
Some industries have stopped production. That's not an option here.
A glass furnace runs 24/7, 365 days a year for 20 years. So we literally can't turn it off. If we turned it off and it went cold, we would lose the whole of the production and whole of the factory.
The steel industry has seen production reduced or paused, but the industry warned today that without government help, temporary shutdowns could become permanently damaging.
If we don't see action now, in the days to weeks ahead of us, then what we'll see is those pauses in production that steel makers are having to implement now when the price of steel is high, those will become more frequent, will become longer, and then my concern would be that we'll then see job losses in the steel sector, which would be very bad news not only for the UK steel sector, but for the economy as a whole.
Businesses, unlike consumers, are not protected by an energy price cap, meaning they're bearing the full brunt of a gas price shock. The UK is in a global scramble for energy. This is where we get our gas from currently. Less than a half now comes from declining reserves in the North Sea. 29% through a pipeline from Norway, a little bit, 2% from mainland Europe, and over a fifth now comes in the form of liquefied natural gas in tankers from places like the US, Qatar, Russia. And there is a bidding war for those tankers, and the voracious appetite of China has seen manufacturers there told to pay whatever it takes to make those tankers change course for Asia. That's pushing prices up here at home, where energy concerns of some small businesses are more personal than industrial.
It's not as easy as just putting on another jumper or putting another blanket over their knees. These people are very vulnerable, they're very poorly quite often, and they don't move very often. So they don't have the kind of lifestyles that you and I have where we can just get up and move around a bit. We have to keep them warm, we have to keep them safe. And looking at the energy bills at the moment, it's feeling like a very scary place for us to be at the moment.
Intensive energy users met with the Business Secretary this afternoon, but no immediate solutions emerged to a crisis that has brutally exposed UK and international reliance on fossil fuels, a month before a major climate summit in Glasgow. Simon Jack, BBC News.
A shortage of abattoir workers has left pig farmers across the UK facing a human disaster, according to the National Farmers Union. Healthy pigs are already having to be destroyed as their meat can't be processed quickly enough, with the industry blaming Brexit and the pandemic. The government says it's keeping the situation under review and working closely with the sector. Danny Savage reports now from East Yorkshire.
It's been a busy week for Kate Moore, who's passionate about the welfare of her animals, but terrified she'll soon have to cull some of them. She's banging the drum for pig farmers.
Why do you say that, Kate?
This morning she was outside doing a live TV interview while her mum and sisters watched in the kitchen.
Come and speak to me, Boris Johnson. Have the guts to stand up and talk to us.
Go girl, go girl.
But behind the supportive smiles, there is a growing sense of despair.
We are struggling so much and all we are asking for is some help.
Did she sum up the tensions?
Yeah, you can see.
She said exactly what the problem is and why it's so heartbreaking. I'm a really optimistic person, but my God, this past week has really, well, longer than that. Has tired and just, We're farmers to feed people. It's a job. You know, that's what we do day in, day out, and we work bloody hard for it as well. And I am not killing pigs for no reason. No way.
So these pigs are averaging about 100 kilos. If they get to 105 kilos, then basically the value of them is halved, basically.
Unlike beef cattle, pigs have a small window of time in which to be sold. Leave it too long and they're too heavy and too big for the retailers.
The reality is that we will actually have to pay to get rid of these pigs, for them to go into landfill or to be burned. We will pay for them. We will not get anything for these pigs.
Another key factor is that these pens are full and there'll soon be no more room to put pigs that are coming through the system. And when they run out of space, that's when they'll have to start culling healthy animals.
The government says it understands the challenges the pig industry is facing and says it's working closely with the sector, keeping the situation under review. But its call to make the industry more attractive to UK workers is frustrating here.
Everybody that works for us is local and British. I am all for Boris Johnson's quote of getting British people in British jobs. I'm for it. But you know what? There won't be a job, there won't be an agricultural industry for these kids to come and work into it.
The family on this farm says the situation must improve in the next fortnight. Danny Savage, BBC News, Driffield.
Let's go to Westminster and to our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake. Jonathan, we heard their real cries of pain from different sectors of the economy. There's a whole host of pressures on the government right now.
Yes, Reeta, the government's under pressure on a number of fronts, and we are seeing those come to a head in a couple of areas, as you've seen, on energy, industry, urging ministers to intervene. After those talks today, the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, promised to help the industry mitigate the impact of those rising costs, but there's no detail on how the government plans to do that. Conservative MPs with links to the steel industry particularly getting nervous, one saying publicly tonight that all options should be considered to protect the industry. And on the pig farmers, some in government are arguing that that problem could be fixed relatively easily by relaxing the English language requirements around certain visas, allowing people to come in from abroad and fill the vacancies to clear the backlog. The trouble is that wouldn't sit easily. The solution, which one minister described to me as politically difficult, with Boris Johnson's big theme right now, which is making the UK economy less reliant on foreign labour. Downing Street has appointed a supply chain advisor, Sir David Lewis, the former Tesco boss, but I'm told we shouldn't expect a drastic change to the government's approach. So it seems, in the face of those warnings of extended shutdowns of production and also a potential mass cull of pigs, Downing Street is content to see those sectors endure some short-term pain for what it hopes will be longer-term gain.
Jonathan, thank you. Jonathan Blake there reporting from Westminster. Up to 50 people have been killed in a suicide bomb attack on a mosque during Friday prayers in northern Afghanistan. The Islamic State group said it carried out the attack on the building in Kunduz city. It's one of the bloodiest since the Taliban took the capital, Kabul, in August. Our correspondent Sikandar Kamani reports.
Fear and panic once again in Afghanistan. Injured victims of the blast are rushed to hospital.
There were so many people who were injured. Hardly anyone was unhurt. Most of those who were sitting there were killed. It's terrible.
The local branch of the Islamic State group, ISK, said it had targeted members of the Shia minority. ISK is much less powerful than their rivals, the Taliban, but has a history of devastating attacks in Afghanistan. In August, more than 150 people were killed at a bombing outside Kabul airport. In recent weeks, IS has also launched dozens of smaller attacks targeting Taliban fighters in eastern Afghanistan. This latest bombing in the north of the country, apparently carried out by a member of the Uyghur ethnic group, suggests IS's influence is expanding.
They are the enemies of our nation. People were just beginning to experience peace, and now this has happened. All our security forces are working on the investigation. We'll find the culprits, and then they will be dealt with according to Sharia law.
The Taliban say they're bringing stability, but IS is a growing concern for Afghans and the wider region. Sikandar Kamani, BBC News.
Let's take a look now at the UK's latest coronavirus figures. The government data shows there were 36,060 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. On average, 35,185 new cases were reported per day in the last week. 6,763 people were in hospital with coronavirus across the UK yesterday. There were 127 deaths. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. 108 deaths were announced on average every day in the past week. 85.4% of the population aged 12 or over have had their first dose of a vaccine, and 78.4% have had both doses. More than 40 million people across the UK are being offered a flu vaccine this year in the NHS's biggest campaign against the illness. Health officials are worried because this will be the first winter that COVID and flu will be in full circulation at the same time. Research shows those infected with both viruses are more than twice as likely to die as someone with COVID alone. The right to freedom of expression has been recognised by this year's Nobel Peace Prize, which has been awarded to two journalists known for their hard-hitting investigations, which have angered their country's powerful elites and leaders. Maria Ressa from the Philippines and Dmitry Muratov from Russia have both faced significant threats. The committee commended their work, saying that independent and fact-based journalism served to protect against the abuse of power and lies. Caroline Hawley reports.
For the first time since 1935, the Peace Prize goes to journalists for their battle to tell the truth at great personal risk.
To Maria Ressa and Dmitry Muratov for their efforts to safeguard freedom of expression, which is a precondition for democracy and lasting peace.
Dmitry Muratov is a Russian journalist who's taken a stand against authoritarian rule. Today he dedicated the award to 6 colleagues who, he said, were murdered for their work. Naming each one of them, he said the prize belonged to them. Their paper, Novaya Gazeta, has been highly critical of President Putin and Russia's ruling elite. Its investigations have exposed electoral fraud, such as the stuffing of ballot boxes, as well as official corruption and police violence.
I don't know what effect this Nobel Award will have on censorship of the media here in Russia, with many investigative journalists being accused of being foreign agents.
Maria Ressa from the Philippines is the other winner, a woman described by the Nobel Committee as fearless. She's faced criminal charges and death threats. Her work has exposed state abuses under the controversial President Rodrigo Duterte, in particular the extrajudicial killings that have come with his deadly war on drugs. Thousands of people, mostly from poor communities, have been murdered. Today, Maria Ressa spoke of the vital importance of telling the truth.
When you don't have facts, you don't have truth, you don't have trust. Trust is what holds us together to be able to solve the complex problems our world is facing today. So when you attack the media, oftentimes it's about shooting the messenger.
Two messengers in the spotlight today as the Nobel Committee says press freedoms are necessary for both democracy and peace, but are under threat around the world. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
The former Northern Ireland Secretary, James Brokenshire, has died at the age of 53. The Conservative MP for Old Bexley and Sidcup was first diagnosed with lung cancer in 2018 and stood down from ministerial duties earlier this year when a tumour returned. His family described him as a brilliant government minister, a dedicated constituency MP and, most importantly, a loving father, devoted husband and faithful friend. James Brokenshire had been an MP since 2005 and served as both Northern Ireland Secretary and Housing Secretary under Theresa May. She paid tribute to him as an outstanding public servant, a talented minister and a loyal friend. And Boris Johnson called Mr Brokenshire the nicest, kindest and most unassuming of politicians, while also being extraordinarily effective. Tributes to the MP James Brokenshire, who's died at the age of 53. 9 people in Northern Ireland are now facing charges in connection with the death of the journalist Lyra McKee, who was shot by the Republican paramilitary group, the New IRA, in Londonderry during rioting in 2019. Those charged have been linked to a hardline political party called CIRU. Police say it is the political voice of the New IRA, which was formed in 2012. They've warned of its attempts to recruit and radicalise young people. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy has this report.
This is the public face of what remains of militant dissident republicanism in Northern Ireland. A march organised by the political party CIRU, who reject the peace agreement which brought an end to decades of violence and see themselves as the true continuation of a radical struggle to bring about a united Ireland. Police investigating the death of Lyra McKee have recently arrested a number of their members.
Whilst it's not true to say that everybody that's associated with CIRU is associated with the New IRA, there was a crossover in terms of some of that membership.
This paramilitary style kind of display you may think looks like more of a throwback to Northern Ireland's past. But for many supporters of CIRU, in their eyes, the conflict continues. They also hope to inspire the next generation to continue the fight. At least a dozen people linked to CIRU are now facing charges for rioting, bomb-making and murder. Security sources have previously told the BBC the man seen here in the green jacket, Thomas Ashmellan, is in the New IRA's leadership. Lyra McKee was shot when a New IRA gunman fired towards police during rioting in Derry. The dissident group believes the use of violence is justified to resist what it sees as British rule in Northern Ireland and continues to try and carry out gun and bomb attacks. Some of those charged in connection with the death of Lyra McKee have been linked with CIRU's youth wing, known as Eastenders. How do you think these groups attract young people?
In terms of how they continue to attract people to this cause, I think what they do is they give young men in particular a place to belong. And I think that sense of belonging is attractive to young men that have few other opportunities in life almost to prove themselves.
The youth of this struggle and our movement here is growing, willing and ready.
Over the past year, the groups held protests in support of New IRA prisoners in jail and stepped up its efforts to attract young people through recruitment videos on social media, aiming to appeal to a generation born long after Northern Ireland's darkest days of violence. Many of those who joined the old provisional IRA during its armed campaign turned away from violence with the Good Friday Agreement in the 1990s. Some of these guys who were in the new IRA would have been in the provisional IRA with you 30, 40 years ago. What motivates them to continue?
There's no semblance of strategic thinking there, but there is a belief in the physical force tradition. That any Irish person has the right to take up arms against the British while the British are here. It's a very marginal ideological niche, but it exists.
How do you feel when you see young people today attracted to that cause that you once fought?
I think it's very sad. They're guided by antiquated ideology, which has no relevance in today's world. Because the people going to jail today will be in for a very long time.
CERU has always denied any involvement with violence. In a statement, the group told us it believes the recent arrests and charges of its members is an attempt to suppress republicanism and that it will not be deterred in pushing forward its ideology. Police say those in the new IRA continue to pose a serious threat, particularly to their own communities. Emma Vardy, BBC News.
President Biden is urging companies in the US to fire workers who haven't been vaccinated against coronavirus. He said anyone worried about large-scale job losses needed to look at the bigger picture. The latest official figures show only 56% of Americans have been fully vaccinated. The president says he'll soon bring in rules requiring all healthcare workers to have the jab, and he's urged individual states to do the same for teachers. But there's been opposition, including in the deeply libertarian region of New England, from where our North America correspondent Aleem Maqbool reports.
It is, they say, about freedom, an individual's right to choose if they get vaccinated, even if they're a nurse. One of the new battlegrounds over COVID in the US is the requirement in some hospitals that all their staff have had the jab. But some, they say, would rather lose their job. Leah Cushman's not just a nurse, but a state politician.
My beliefs are religious. I believe that my Creator endowed me with an immune system that protects me, and if I get sick, that's an act of God.
But have you never been vaccinated against anything?
I have before I was saved by the Lord, yes.
With that logic, you wouldn't take any medicines?
That's not true. No, I wouldn't take one that affects the immune system this way.
Of course, even vaccinated staff have the potential to pass on the virus to patients, but hospital managers say unvaccinated healthcare workers getting sick also puts more strain on resources, and suspect for some there are bigger forces at play.
It's not just COVID. There are other vaccines that employees are required to have. MMR is an example, hepatitis. So, again, this is a highly electrified issue, if you will, and we all recognize that. To say it's not political would be disingenuous.
Save our teachers! And the controversy swept up another profession too, with school staff being threatened with sacking if they don't get vaccinated, including in New York City. In Connecticut, teacher Kasim Outlaw refused the vaccine and testing and has already lost his job.
I do not use any kind of synthetic ingredients in my life, whether that be for medicinal purposes, supplementation, food and fuel. So the idea of becoming inoculated is something that goes directly against the way that I live my life and have lived for the last decade or more.
But what is the harm in getting tested every week?
So when we talk about harm, I view it as an unnecessary medical procedure.
Kasim had COVID, so says his natural immunity should suffice. But that's not enough for a government ramping up pressure on the unvaccinated. Aleem Maqbool, BBC News. Football now, and Wales have drawn a critical World Cup qualifying match 2-2 away against the Czech Republic. They fell behind thanks to a calamitous own goal when the Welsh goalkeeper Danny Ward completely missed a back pass from Aaron Ramsey before Daniel James scored an equaliser from a through ball from Harry Wilson.
Now, she was one of the most photographed figures of the late 20th century. Diana, Princess of Wales, remains a continuing source of intense fascination, nearly a quarter of a century after her death. Now, a new film, Spencer, has just had its UK premiere at the London Film Festival. It looks at the strained relationship between the late princess, her husband Prince Charles, and the royal family. Our entertainment correspondent Lizo Mazimba spoke to the star of the film, Kristen Stewart.
3 days. That's it.
It's set over Christmas 1991, a period when Diana felt trapped by the royal family. Taking on the role was empowering, says Kristen Stewart.
To play her, even though it was sad and tumultuous, ironically, I felt taller. I felt like somebody who could lead with love and make people feel good, and it's really contagious. It comes right back at you. Why do you think I got delayed by someone?
Oh, come on, come on. They are circling us.
It seems they're circling just me.
Performers always feel pressure playing real-life figures. It's an even greater sense of responsibility for someone like Diana.
I felt such love for her and still do, and you know, in a way that isn't, you know, without implying like a kind of developed spirituality, I felt her. I wanted to protect her. There is no future. Past and the present are the same thing.
She is someone who many feel was exploited throughout her life, and now there are still things that are making money from her. Do people who think that a film like this is perhaps at best unnecessary and at worst exploitative have a point?
We came to this with love. Like we truly, first foot forward is always trying to understand somebody that we love. The negotiation between art and commerce is a vast subject. I believe in art. I believe in trying to get closer to other people through it. They know everything. They don't.
There's still almost 6 months to go, but Kristen Stewart is already striding well ahead of her Oscar Best Actress rivals. Lizo Mazimba, BBC News.
That's it. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a very good night. Bye-bye.
Hello again. Friday was another very mild day with top temperatures reaching 22 degrees Celsius. Many of us had quite cloudy weather. However, there were some decent breaks around. Some of the best of the sunshine across northern England. It was a fine end to the day there in Wakefield. Now, at the moment, we're starting to see some fresher air extending across East Anglia, southern counties of England, reaching the Midlands later on Saturday. And as those humidity levels drop, the cloud right now is breaking up. But at the same time, it stays pretty murky for northern England, Wales, southwest England, with some spots of drizzle, a few mist and fog patches. And then we've got this rain that's turning heavier right now for Northern Ireland, West Scotland. Could bring some localised surface water flooding. Now, this front that's been with us for the last couple of days is going to finally start to move away from the northwest, and eventually the rain turns lighter and patchier as it heads into the